It's Wrestling Observer Radio. I'm Garrett Gonzales. As always, alongside Dave Meltzer, post-Crown Jewel edition of the show. Brian is on his way to Chicago to put a hurting on Marco Stunt. So we're going to be doing two shows in a row. But this is also up a little bit earlier than usual because of of the show. And if anything happens tonight that we don't get to, we'll talk about tomorrow. But first of all, Crown Jewel. What the heck was that show?
There's so much to talk about when it comes to Crown Jewel. It's going to be... So I guess one of the things was that they did no propaganda at all. When you watch the show, they never once mentioned Saudi Arabia, although they did mention Riyadh, the city they were in, and the name of the stadium, but they never mentioned Saudi Arabia.
Lots of live shots of the stadium, over the top, crowd.
Yeah, lots of crowd shots. They tried to get a lot of shots of kids. They tried to get shots of women in the crowd, even though they were pretty much mostly covered. So that was like the subtle stuff that they were doing. The show was, John Cena wouldn't come for his reasons. Daniel Bryan wouldn't come, which we'll talk about actually both of those things later. And we got a couple of, I guess, the two key things. The show sucked.
From a wrestling perspective, it was not good at all.
No, it was bad. I mean, the Triple H has what appears to be a torn right pec. He got that. I think he took. Was it from the Harley Race bump?
I think that's what people are saying it was from.
That's what I thought. He came back in, and then the match just was a mess. Shawn Michaels tried to do a moonsault from the top to the floor. Undertaker and Kane were supposed to catch him. Somehow they were both right there, and he fell right in the middle between them. Like they weren't close enough together.
Neither of them stepped forward. Maybe it was a communication or something.
Yeah, it was almost like, hey, it was like two outfielders. Hey, there's a fly ball. It's coming, and you both back off.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So he fell right on his face. He got a small cut over his left eye, and his nose looked like it was smashed. The match, it was just sad. It was really, it wasn't terrible. I mean, they went like 27 minutes, and until Triple H got hurt, it wasn't terrible at all, but it wasn't good. It was just kind of there, and it was just kind of like Shawn was okay. There was nothing really wrong with him, but he wasn't Shawn Michaels.
My sense is that a lot of the fans are comfortable saying Undertaker was bad, Kane was bad, Triple H was what it was.
Triple H was hurt. He wasn't good or bad. I mean, until he got hurt, he's always solid. He's a lot lighter, which is probably good at his age to be a lot lighter. It's probably good.
Though
for
it
his
didn't
health.
help in the pec injury.
No, but he has a propensity towards torn muscles for obvious reasons.
But I guess the point is that fans desperately want to believe that Shawn Michaels is the Shawn Michaels that we all remember. I'm seeing lots of comments of saying, everyone else was bad, but Shawn was good. We should
Shawn was okay. I mean, Shawn wasn't bad, but I would say, look, he's 53 years old. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I will say that, and I think I mentioned that to you when we were watching the show, the thing that, like, in the middle of that match that popped into my head because of a guy who was great and then had a long layoff and came back, which was Ricky Steamboat. Mm-hmm. And I thought Shawn was nothing close to Ricky Steamboat when Ricky Steamboat came back. I was expecting him to be, I can't say I was expecting him to be as good because Steamboat was kind of blow away good. Not in his first match back, but by the second match. And then, the rest of the run. I mean, I remember like talking to Jericho, and Jericho goes like, look, he's probably one of the 10 best guys in the company right now. And Shawn was clearly not close to the 10 best guys in the company right now.
Is some of it, though, that Shawn didn't have a Jericho to work with?
Yes, some of it is. Perhaps if he worked with Jericho, he would. That's true. But Steamboat had a zip in his movement that Shawn didn't have. Do you know what I mean? It's like he still seemed very, I don't know if the word is athletic. I mean, Shawn did nip-ups, but it was just, you know what it is? It's Steamboat didn't get tired, and Shawn, you could see, had to rest long periods. So I guess that's the difference. Steamboat kept up a pace. Shawn never kept up a pace.
Is it possible he got knocked a little bit loopy when he banged his face on the outside?
I'm sure he did. How could you not? He landed on his head. I'm sure he got, 53-year-old guy landing on your head from the top of the ring post. I'm sure he got hurt, And you saw when he landed, he didn't look happy at all. Didn't they say something like
Renee said that he was smiling?
He was smiling, and I looked at him and it goes like he landed on his face. He's not happy at all.
No, I thought it was like he was just making sure he was still alive.
Yeah, and I mean, watching him, I kept thinking of Mirko Cro Cop when he fought Czech Congo, when it's like you're in there and you're in the middle of this match, and all of a sudden it dawns on you, I'm too old to be doing this shit. Like Mirko said that to John McCarthy when he's in this fight with Czech Congo. He's getting the worst of it to a guy he would destroy in his prime. And I mean, this isn't a fight, but Sean, he's in this match, and Sean has this certain level of excellence that people expect from him and that he probably expects from himself. And it was like, man, I mean, again, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't, he was 53 years old. Although to his credit, he was in great shape.
Yep.
I mean, he was in great shape, but everyone ages at a certain level, and you can't fight it no matter how hard you train. I mean, Steamboat was the anomaly. Steamboat wasn't the, Tenryu. But Tenryu's different. Tenryu never walked away. When Tenryu was 53, or Negro Casas, they never walked away. It's you walk away for 8 years and you come back. It's not ring rust, but it's ring shape.
Do you get any sense on whether you think he's going to continue wrestling or whether it's a one-time thing? I think everyone was probably hoping and begging, who was a Shawn Michaels fan who still wants to see him wrestle, that he'll work against someone like AJ at WrestleMania or something.
Yeah, I don't know. He said that he would come back for tag matches because he knew he could do tag matches. Maybe he'll want to prove something and do another match, but maybe falling on your face like that makes you just go, I'm old for this, I got nothing left to prove. So I don't know, and this match, again, coming back in such a bad match, that will fuel him in one way or the other. But it's hard to say which one it'll be. It might fuel him to say, hey, I don't want this to be my last match, or hey, maybe retirement wasn't the worst idea at the time I did it. But then again, he'll probably blame it on the other guys, honestly. And he wouldn't be wrong.
If he doesn't have another match, they'll try very hard to make people forget that this match existed and make the Undertaker match his last match.
I know. His last match with Undertaker was so great, and then this match was just a mess. Yeah.
So Lesnar wins, which I think was a surprise to a lot of people.
I think, yeah. I mean, you always knew there was a chance because they've done it. How many times can you surprise people with Lesnar winning without you going like, well, there's always a chance. So Lesnar is signed for at least 2 more appearances. He's going to face AJ at Survivor Series, which is non-title. And then the plan is for Strowman, whether that's at Rumble or Mania, I don't know. I could see Strowman winning the Rumble and then facing Lesnar at Mania. I could definitely see that. So it's interesting, okay? Because I know what I saw, and you know what you saw, and I also know what they wanted to produce. So this is what they wanted to produce. This is the story they wanted to tell. That Baron Corbin hits Strowman in the back of the head with the belt, and he's out. And Lesnar gives him F5 after F5, F5 off the top ropes. And finally, with the 5th F5, 6th, whatever the number was, I think it was the 5th, he was pinned. So the story was that he was down and out before the match started, and Lesnar's F5 couldn't beat him. And no matter how many times he F5'd him, it took so many to beat him. Most people saw this as, what the fuck? This was like a squash match. Why did you get no offense in? The idea was for him to get no offense. That was the mentality, because they thought if he got offense, it would weaken him because then he got beat. The idea was not that he got beat or squashed. The idea was that he kept surviving the F5 over and over and over again until finally it was too much. And he had to take one over the top rope to the floor, which was nuts because he wasn't moving too well before the match even started. When he walked down the ramp, the 2 things noticeable when he walked down the ramp was he was moving real slow. You could see that he had some knee issues. The other one was that, although that played nothing into this, he's going to be wrestling on this tour and all that. But I could see that. The other one is that you could see he wasn't going to win the championship. It was all over his face.
Yeah.
It was all over his face when he walked down.
Yeah. So in that situation, because I think, like you said, most people think they saw squash, and when I said, well, it did take 5 F5s, and they were like, it doesn't matter. He didn't do anything.
The idea was that he got no offense on Brock, because if he had gotten offense on, that's the story is, what if it was a fair fight if he had gotten offense on Brock? And I think a lot of people were watching it and didn't understand that story.
Yeah.
Which is not your fault for not understanding it, because quite frankly, when I watched it, I didn't understand it either until I was told the story when it was over. So the fact is that story, the announcers did not tell that story. And that's on them, because that's the job of the announcers to get the story of the match over. So
he's wrestling AJ at Survivor Series again.
Which is interesting on a couple levels, because number one, he's got, in theory, a big fight. And keep in mind, no matter what, he's not signed for nothing with UFC. And don't ever put this out of your thought process that even with the USADA stuff, and clearly, he's in the drug. He's got to be in the drug testing pool for his leverage.
Right.
So he's got to be. Okay. So the whole thing is, this still may be nothing more than Brock playing Vince for the last year with the whole UFC, and Dana too. I mean, when you watch them step by step and how much money this guy's making, the smartest of the three in this equation is the lunkhead from Minnesota, who's supposed to be not a smart guy, and he's proven to be smarter than. I mean, is there anyone in wrestling who's no one, right?
I still want you to put that list together.
The smartest guy in wrestling?
The top 5 smartest guys in wrestling.
Brock's got to be pretty close. As far as the ability to manipulate two people who think that they're manipulating other people, Brock's at the top of the list. But they backed up the Brinks truck for him again because they thought he was going to go. Now, if he is wrestling at Rumble, okay, there's no way he can wrestle in late January, early February against whoever it is, and we could talk about Cormier and Derek Lewis and Jon Jones and that escapade. But even if it's WrestleMania, you do a fight for the championship, and then you come back at WrestleMania. What if you win the championship? You're not going to come back at WrestleMania, but you have to come back at WrestleMania, because I'm sure that these 3 matches were contracted to when he let Lesnar win. That I'm sure of. Vince is not in no way, shape, or form. But now, in theory, not even in theory, unless it's at Rumble, and Brock loses at Rumble and then goes and fights in like March or April. But then here's the thing: March is the deadline in theory, not which is not locked in stone, but the deadline for Cormier, because Cormier says he's retiring on his birthday. So if Lesnar's not wrestling before March, so there's a lot of interesting timing issues here, but it also puts a situation where Lesnar may go into that match as champion against Cormier, maybe Jon Jones, which is a big part of the story today, or whoever, Derek Lewis, and, the WWE champion may walk into a UFC fight and get destroyed, which, I guess it's okay, but, promotions have gone to great lengths over the years to make sure that never happens. So it's again, in this day and age, it probably matters less than any other time in history, but it's still, 5 years ago, Vince McMahon would never allow a champion to go in a position to be destroyed in a real fight. There's no way. So it's a fascinating, it's all fascinating. That's all I could say.
Do you think he shows up at MSG tomorrow?
You know as well as I do, there's only one person who knows the answer to that, and that's Brock. He either flew to New York or he flew to Minneapolis, and I don't know which one he flew to, but he will arrive in the United States on Saturday, and when he arrives, he's either going back to Canada, going back to Minnesota, wherever he's going, or he's going to Madison Square Garden, and we'll know tomorrow night. And that's the game he's playing. If he thinks that's the right game, he'll be in Madison Square Garden. If he thinks it's the wrong game, he won't be.
I talked to a friend today who's really loved the Cormier Lesnar stuff from the first time, and he said he doesn't think that they could do it better.
Agreed. They couldn't. It'll only be a weaker angle.
Right. And so that's why he thought Brock wouldn't be there. But I mean, we also know that, Brock likes to keep eyeballs on him, and he likes to be unpredictable about what he's going to do.
It's still New York, showing up in Madison Square Garden. I wonder what he thinks of Cormier being so heavy, because he's got to know.
Do you know if Jon Jones is going to be there tomorrow?
I don't know. I would presume he's there now. I'm sure. I would be almost certain he'll be there tomorrow.
Because that would make me think that Brock could be there, is if he's got both Jones and Cormier there.
And do something with Jones.
And he just, he sort of figures out what he should do from that moment.
Okay, so if you're UFC and you're Brock Lesnar, which one do you want? Because all of a sudden, Jon Jones has jumped into this thing saying that he doesn't want Daniel Cormier if he beats Gustafsson. He wants Brock Lesnar because it's some of the more money. Daniel Cormier has said that he would rather fight Jon Jones, but he knows there's more money in Brock Lesnar. So it's kind of like, I think did he say it like, my wife wants me to fight Lesnar because it's the most money, but as an athlete, I really want to fight the best guy, and go with the idea that we're the two greatest of all time, and now we're going to have a fair fight. And the thing is knowing Cormier, that's a very strong motivation for him, because he knows that if he beats Jon Jones, it's his career rival who beat him twice, and cheated to beat him once and maybe cheated to beat him both times. So there's like a real, Cormier did beat Stipe Miocic. That Cormier beat Stipe Miocic. I don't think we're going to see the same Cormier. Here's the other thing. So much depends on the Cormier fight. What if Cormier...
Well, both of them, right? Both Jones and Cormier.
Yeah, and they both could lose. I mean, and they, I know Brock could be sitting there because Brock, knowing Brock,
he doesn't have to win a fight at all.
I know, but the thing is with Brock, if you're Brock, you think Cormier taking this fight is the dumbest thing in the world, okay? And I think that him probably thinking Jones taking Gustafsson. We'll see how it goes. Gustafsson's the one guy who can beat Jon Jones. I mean, I saw the first fight, and granted, I know that Jon Jones didn't train for the first fight worth of shit, and got surprised and all that. But Gustafsson, continues to improve. Although God knows he's been hurt a lot too, so you just don't know. But the Gustafsson who fought Glover Teixeira, I think beats Jon Jones. A different Gustafsson who fought Rumble and a lot of the other guys doesn't beat Jon Jones. So it's kind of impossible to know what you're going to get. But it's a risk. Jones can't just use his reach and everything like that, and his stand-up isn't appreciably better. They're similar level. He can't even just throw around him and out-wrestle him. I mean, he might be able to out-wrestle him at his hardest, but it's going to take all the, Gustafsson's got great balance. Cormier couldn't take down Gustafsson either.
All right, we're going to come back to the UFC stuff. I want to stay on with the Crown Jewel stuff because Shane McMahon ended up winning the World Cup after it was all said and done. It didn't make a whole lot of sense watching it, and I think it was out of a wacky show that didn't have great wrestling. It was maybe the wackiest thing that happened on the show, like from a booking standpoint. You're just like, what the heck were they thinking?
Yeah, so the idea is that Shane's going heel, and this was, Miz wasn't hurt. This was all booked to be exactly what it is, the beginning of a Shane McMahon heel turn. As far as why you want another heel authority McMahon figure on a show, I guess it's a response to declining ratings of SmackDown. Maybe it's something that they feel that they need going, Fox is a year from now, so it seems like to shoot that angle now for Fox. But, I kept thinking, when it almost reminds me, it doesn't almost, it totally reminds me, when roller games used to do stop and starts, and they always had the same angle whenever they would get on TV. They'd be on for like a year, and then they'd go. This is after long after the peak. This is like in the late '70s, early '80s. The one where the alligator pit. Then they had the rock and roller games, and then what was the last one that they had? I don't even remember. They had the ESPN one, the alligator pit one, but they kept going back, and every one they did the exact same storyline over and over again because it's the only one that they knew because it was the one that, it's the heel authority figure. It's the same one that they did their biggest business with in the early '70s. And they kept going back to it whenever they had to start something because it's the only one. The heel authority figure, Georgia Haas, who would bully the pretty girls and make life miserable for them. And you want the pretty girls to get their revenge on the ugly old bitch. And that was the storyline they always went to. And with WWE, the great storyline they have is the heel McMahon figure, whether it's Vince, Stephanie, or Shane. And so we're going to Fox. And what do we do when we start something new? The heel McMahon authority figure is what we do to start off because God knows 2 million people on a Friday night on Fox every week is going to be a failure.
But doing that in the Attitude Era, obviously hottest period. But it seems like every time they do that, it's just diminishing returns, declining ratings.
Absolutely. When I saw the beginning of that, I didn't go, great. I thought, this is going to suck. The last thing we need is a freaking heel authority figure right now. It's so overdone. It's 20 plus years, 20 years of the same thing. I mean, it's stale as shit. And plus, the only redeeming value I ever thought in Shane was that he was a babyface. If you take that away, it's like, it's like he's popular and people like him. He's the McMahon that they like. I mean, heel Shane McMahon, you know what I mean? I don't know. So, but that's what that's about is Shane is gonna, it's Shane. That stuff that I just said, I know. Okay, this stuff now is supposition from watching how everything went down. It looked to me, with the way Shane over celebrating, that it's going to go to his head and he's going to really believe he's the best in the world. And that's going to be where you get the heat, where the fans start to get mad at him because he really believes that he's the best in the world, which explains why they kept saying best in the world over and over and over again. Because when this tournament was first put together, this was the finish. Or it was always the finish. This was not something that whatever. It was always going to be the finish that Shane was going to turn heel when this thing ends. And that's where the best in the world comes in.
Okay, I do have one question about that, though. If that was the finish, why were Rey Mysterio, maybe even Seth Rollins, why were those guys in this tournament, knowing that they weren't going to win?
You need some names for credibility.
I mean, because Rey, bring him back for the SmackDown 1000. He's got a sweet deal. You give him a lot of money to then have his first loss be on this show in a nothing match.
Well, they protected him by the fact that Randy Orton destroyed him after his match, so he went and weakened. That's the mentality behind it. They thought they protected Rey. Same way they thought they protected Braun. I don't know if it worked. I know with Braun, nobody got it. With Rey, I don't think that they really cared. It was kind of like, But yeah, no, everybody was confused. I mean, I guess they felt that they didn't want Rey to look weak and quit. They didn't want Randy Orton to look weak and quit. So obviously they didn't want Jeff Hardy to look weak and quit. So Miz had to be the one to look weak and quit for Shane to go in there. And then on the other side, I guess they didn't want Shane to beat Seth Rollins. So they didn't want him to beat Bobby Lashley. So, I suppose he could have beaten Kurt, but I guess they didn't want Kurt to wrestle 3 times. And that's where Ziggler comes in. Ziggler's the one that they don't have any compunction about beating Ziggler. But yeah, that match sucked.
Poor Zig.
2 minutes.
Poor Ziggler didn't know it was going to be a shoot fight.
I know, really. Really.
So after the show was over, you showed me a retweet from Shane, which was he tweeted about a movie which is produced. His wife's one of the producers, and it's called A Private War. And there was either weird irony or he didn't get the whole thing.
I don't think he got it.
But explain what the movie is.
Okay, so Marie Colvin was a reporter, and she's actually from, I think Queens, New York. And she was writing for, a UK publication, Sunday Telegraph. I don't remember the publication, but she was working for a UK newspaper. She was covering a war in Syria. This is like in 2012. And she was murdered. She was killed. The belief is that the Syrian government killed her. So here, his wife does a movie about this reporter who, because the government of a foreign country hates them, has them killed. In theory, again, that's a theory of why she died, or of who killed her. And Shane is, while his wife is doing this movie, and it comes out on November 16th, I think it is. Is that a Friday? Whatever.
I think there's some. The wide distribution may still be happening, but there's been some. I've started to see a lot of reviews come out about it today.
Yeah, because it's opening in New York and L.A. It's opening in New York and L.A. tonight, I think. If not in the next couple days, but it's opening in 2 weeks nationally. So she's producing this movie. I mean, if my wife had produced a movie on this subject, there's no way in hell I could go and do this show. I mean, I couldn't even think. I mean, it's like, what does she think? It's like maybe who knows what she thinks. I don't even want to think about it. But it's like
she's been in this family for a while, so she probably knew.
That's true. She married into the McMahon family, so you kind of know what the morality level is. But I think I would. I mean, that would be it, right? I mean, that. I don't know, man. I think a lot of marriages would just be destroyed off of that decision. But again, every marriage is different. But I mean, so he's in Saudi Arabia and he's tweeting, and I'm sure he doesn't even get it because they're in their bubble and they're just, they don't even. I wonder, do you think he even tied it together? It's hard. It's hard not to in this one, isn't it?
It is really hard not to tie it together.
But he's been doing, and he's been tweeting it all week while they're, doing this show in this country that just, killed an American reporter who the government in that country didn't like. Unbelievable.
Yeah. That was not what I thought I would see after the show was over for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can run down the matches in a little bit, but I wanted to point out, because in the latest Observer, there's a lot of information on Daniel Bryan and his choice to not go and do the show. You wrote...
And Cena.
But you wrote that it wasn't actually... I mean, I'm sure it was maybe part of the decision, but you said really what the decision was about for Bryan was how they treated Sami Zayn the first time.
It was a couple of things. When he went to the first one... when he was first going to the first one, it wasn't going to be as a wrestler; it was going to be as a general manager of SmackDown. And they go to all countries. You know what I mean? It was not a issue. They go to the Middle East, so it wasn't an issue. He didn't really know anything, and I don't think he knew anything until it became real controversial in the last week or so. But he'd already committed, and not even the last week, but the last couple of weeks before the first show, there was a lot of controversy, and like a lot of the guys, and he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of guys on the first one who, I mean, hell, I didn't know that much about Saudi Arabia until people started sending me articles. I mean, it's so a lot of people learned a lot of stuff back in April because this was, this was very much questioning the decision. So by the time he went there, it was, I mean, again, I'm not in his brain. I don't know exactly, but he and many others very much were questioning it by the time they went there. And then for him, I think the two key things were, number one, it's like, I think that they all kind of were like, okay, we can go with the idea that in time women are going to get more and more prominent, which they will. You know, they're sort of allowed to drive now, although the women who protested, you know, in trying to get the driving are all in jail. But I mean, there's you make whatever, you know, you're working for the company and you know, you're not in a war yourself, and you know, it's really not your issue. But I think that what nailed it for him was when he went is number one, again, the guys that went didn't know what the story was. They just thought they were going for a wrestling show. They didn't know they were a propaganda arm for the Saudi Arabian government. Nobody knew that going in. I mean, maybe the top guys, maybe Triple H knew, but I'm sure even like Kurt and those guys didn't know. But you got to do what you got to do. He's there. They're trying to get him to say good stuff. He's already read the stuff, so it gets very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But that's not why you're not going to the show. But yeah, the thing is that when they didn't let Sami Zayn come, and the thing with Sami Zayn too is, you know, and this is always like WWE. They're so what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say they don't have any balls, but you know what I mean? Is that probably the way to put? Because it's like the whole thing with Sami Zayn, how they slinked away from it. You know what I mean? It's not like they you know, to this day they won't admit what happened.
Right.
You know. And you know, like in this whole thing of okay, they went to Saudi Arabia, but for weeks they won't mention Saudi Arabia on TV, mm-hmm. and on this whole show they never tell you it's from Saudi Arabia. It's like, we're going to do it, but we're going to back off at the same time, and it's kind of like whatever. So anyway, so Sami Zayn wasn't allowed to go. So to him, that's racism. Mm-hmm. So that was a line he couldn't cross, and the other one was that the treatment of gays in Saudi Arabia, when he found out about that, that's another line he couldn't cross. So that was the reason that he didn't go, even before the Khashoggi thing. And then, you know, he just wasn't going to go. And whatever Tuesday was or wasn't, the only person who knows is Vince, because this was Vince's call to make him submit. All I know is that I know Vince's mentality about babyfaces submitting on television. And again, I can't even remember, who's the last one? A top babyface to submit. And I know some people go, oh, he's not a top babyface, he's a mid-card guy, which in fact, if you watch the booking, he kind of is. But he ain't paid like a mid-card guy. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, and the one thing, you know, I mean, that's the one thing that's the savior of him, is that, you know, will Vince, and maybe he will, you know, again, will he turn into what Bill Watts did with Brian Pillman on a much higher level, in the sense of spite him to, you know, even though I'm paying him to be a top guy and he can be a top guy, I'm just going to spite him, you know. And I guess time will tell what's going to happen next. I don't know, but it
would imagine that Daniel Bryan's personality, maybe from like he's just, you know, he can deal with it. He's not going to create issues where maybe that's some of the reason why you would do that to someone, is you want to see their reaction, you want to see them frustrated. And Daniel Bryan seems like the kind of guy where he's like, okay, I'll just do my job.
Well, if they wanted to get to him mentally, that will fail, because he's the opposite of Brian Pillman. You know what I mean? In the sense that Brian Pillman, when Bill Watts did that to Brian Pillman, now Brian Pillman was very much standing up to Bill Watts, and he will not back down, and he's going to wait out. You know, he's not going to fire me. He can't fire me. So if he wants to make me the highest paid jobber in pro wrestling history, do it. I'm not backing down to him. With Daniel Bryan, it's not a matter of backing down or anything like this. The fact is Daniel Bryan, like in the match with AJ, or just anything, it's like he just wants to be a wrestler. You know, and as long as he can go and wrestle and have fun, he doesn't care if he loses. He never got in the business to be the main event at WrestleMania. He just got in the business because he liked to be in the business, and he succeeded far beyond any. That's the thing. It's like a lot of people, to everyone that succeeds to that level, whether, let's look at a comparable person. And I'm not saying that they're comparable stars, but in some ways they are. Jericho, okay? Jericho, who I know very well, okay? Jericho got in the business because he wanted to be in the business. I don't think Jericho ever thought he was going to be making $1 million a year and headlining the Tokyo Dome and being this whatever. I don't think, maybe he did, but I don't think I think he thought he could be really good at it, and I think he worked his ass off to be good. But I don't really think he ever thought, that this was how it was going to end up, and it was going to be, really a great success story. But at a certain point, when he became a big success story, he thought of himself as a big success story, and he didn't use what I thought when I'm 25 years old, you know what I mean, to be now. Whereas with it's like he had the ego of when he became a superstar, he got the ego of a superstar. Just like Brett, or Ric Flair or anybody, when they became Daniel Bryan, when he became super, super hot, I think that he understood that he was a hot star, but I don't think he ever developed the ego that every single other person, with no exceptions, sometimes people will point to guys and go, oh, like they're this and this. And it's like, with no exceptions, not Bruno Sammartino's not an exception, even though he was a great down-to-earth guy. Bruno Sammartino absolutely had the ego of a superstar. Is there anyone who was top who really didn't? I can't come up with one, except for Bryan Danielson is the one that I would say is like, he's the one guy where if you want to, beat him down, he'll just be happy. He's just happy to be a wrestler, and it's like he's a minimalist as far as like, he doesn't need a fancy car, he doesn't need $1 million home or $2 million home. You know what I mean? Even though he's like a superstar, he doesn't need to wear the nice clothes and behave like every single other person in that situation would do. So he's the one guy where, if that in fact is the goal, is to, but here's the thing: the goal probably isn't about Daniel Bryan.
The rest of the company.
It's about the rest of everybody else in the company, the smart guys in the company, without mentioning any names. There's some very intelligent guys in the company, and they know what the score is, and I don't think any of them are happy, and several of them went here, and some of them stayed home because they weren't booked, not because they decided to stay home. But I think it's to teach them, like, okay, you do this, and we'll see. That's, and it will work on them.
So also in The Observer, you said Cena, that you thought it was probably just someone advising him for his career, that he shouldn't go to that show.
Yeah. He doesn't. He's in the middle of doing a movie or doing movies, and it would be a real bad look for his movie career to do that. So, but in both cases, which is completely different from, say, any other sport, right? In any other sport, if something like this happened, number one, would be a giant story, because you got Cena, who's the biggest star of the last 10, 15 years, and Daniel Bryan, who's, one of the highest paid guys in the whole company, and one of the most popular stars. It would be a giant story, and it really isn't. And also, neither of them will say anything publicly about it because of loyalty to whatever. They'd be stupid too.
Yeah.
So they don't. But like, if it was somebody in UFC and they wanted to do a show in Saudi Arabia next week, and Daniel Cormier just goes, I just can't go. Daniel Cormier wouldn't be afraid to talk. And these, it really, these type of stories really tell you just how, like, unless you're like, you write about wrestling and you also write about other things, like people who are only in the wrestling world, I think that's one of the good things about now, me being out of the wrestling world a lot. And then you being, a sports fan, not a wrestling fan, a sports fan. It's really weird Because, I mean, if this was football, I mean, number one, it'd be gigantic. And number two, the football player wouldn't be like scared to death to talk. And they wouldn't have the loyalty to the team like a wrestler would have, going like, oh, it's bad for my team, I shouldn't talk.
Right. But aren't there like golf and tennis events that are happening out there for big money?
There are, yeah, but that was before. And the tennis thing hasn't been canceled yet, so we're going to see if they go or they don't go. But yeah, there's a big tennis thing that's coming up in January that it's up in the air whether it's going to happen now, but absolutely yes. So that will become a different story.
So you're saying,
but if tennis players pull out and won't go, they won't be afraid to say why. But I mean, look, I lived through the whole South Africa thing.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, all this stuff about how if we don't go, nothing's going to change. I know the horseshit that is, because I lived through South Africa, because what changed them was people not going, not people going and taking the money.
Right. Okay, do you want to go through the matches on this show?
Sure.
So the pre-show match was Nakamura beating Rusev to retain his U.S. title. I'll just list the matches and you can kind of talk about them.
Okay, so the match was good. I mean, they didn't get much time. They could certainly do a much better match, but actually I think that this was probably one of the 2 or 3 best matches on the whole show. It was a solid, it was basically like a 9-minute SmackDown match with a 2. Well, of course, no Lana. Well,
right.
That's obvious, though. I mean, there couldn't be, but yeah, that was an interesting. But there couldn't be, but whatever. I mean, that's another one that's just interesting to me because it's not like the Russian circus couldn't bring their women, and it's not like there's no sports in Saudi Arabia. And I know that I don't know what it is about. I'm sure that they're thought of as different or whatever. I mean, I'm sure if WWE could bring the women, they would have. I don't think that they're, but I don't want to say they didn't have the balls to push it. I don't know what it, again, because that's probably not fair in this case, not on the other case, but in this case it probably is. But, a lot of this stuff of like, oh, someday we'll be able to bring the women. It's like other people already do.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the big breakthrough is, and I don't know why. Again, I'm not sure why. Well, they'd have to cover her up from neck down, but whatever. But yeah, they didn't bring her. Yeah, that was that, and then the show starts. And
so Hogan comes out, and he is the host.
We only saw him once,
we never saw him again. Yeah,
he came out, did a very cliche Hulk Hogan promo. Mm-hmm. It felt like, I mean, the people. Here's the thing about the crowd that you have to understand. Also, there were, and again, a percentage, maybe 25% of the people in the crowd were fans, and they were doing "This is awesome," and they were chanting and all that. And the rest of them, you could tell, are just kind of like bemused by this whole thing. It's like whenever a chant would start, it was a weak chant, but all the chants would go. You would have all the chants you would get on an American show, but they never, like, you could see that the whole crowd, or they would try to show a few people chanting and you could see everyone around quiet. It was a lot of people who were there because they're there, whatever it is, how tickets sold out immediately, whether they're handed out or you're supposed to go, so you go. I mean, there are wrestling fans there, but there's not like 18,000 fans or whatever the number of people were there. So the point of all this is Hogan comes out and they cheered him. All Hogan's controversy and all that stuff, that never made it to Saudi Arabia. And believe me, like with the stuff that they lived through, I'm sure that the idea that he said something racist is probably very mild in their world. So
the shots that get me at the crowd though are of those young children, because you just wonder, like.
But they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know, but they're sort of. They're here and they're pretty innocent and they're watching, they're having a good time, and then you kind of go, okay, then they got to go back to whatever they go back to.
So he did his cliches. He was cheered, but it did feel like it felt like the return of Hulk Hogan was very subdued. It wasn't like the big, emotional reaction, whether cheers or boos, that you would expect from it. It was kind of there, and it was kind of like, wow, they wasted Hogan's return. If if you're one of those people who wanted to see Hogan's return, it felt like it was wasted. And if you didn't want to see his return, you still didn't want to see it. So that was that.
I feel a little bad for him because in order for him to be Hulk Hogan, he's got to wear the cutoff shirt. So his arms got to be a specific size.
It's sad.
And he seemingly has to be like that forever, right? Like that.
You can't. You run out of time. It catches up to you. You can't. You know. I mean, when was the last time I saw Hulk live? It would have been, God, I don't know. I'm thinking like 3-4 years ago, and he was, he was pretty big even then. You know, it was like I remember like couldn't walk well at all. Still can't.
There was a San Jose house show.
I didn't go
pre WrestleMania 31 where he came out to hype the WrestleMania.
Oh, right. I didn't go to that show. Yeah,
that would be the last time I saw him.
Okay, the last time I saw him was I'm thinking it was before one of the SummerSlams in Los Angeles, and it was when I did the podcast with Austin that Austin lost. So that's probably 5 years ago now, right?
The great forgotten podcast.
The great interview that Steve Austin did with me. Legitimately, it was one of the best ones that I ever did, that he ever did, and then none of it, like zero of it, ever was taped. So we had a great conversation.
That's why I look at the recorder about every 5 minutes.
That was a great conversation. So that it would have been that weekend.
Yeah.
I saw Hogan, and he was pretty big. I mean, that's what I know, because I saw Sting, and Sting looked real young for his age, because he's a couple of months older than me. He looked real young, and it's like, yeah, Sting looks young. Hulk, doesn't look young. Hulk's like 5 years older than me, but he was real. Like I said, he was real big, but it's like you could see, it's just it is. He's 65, so he's 6 years older than me. Almost 7 years older. So he's 65 years old, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like he's not gonna, I mean, he's not gonna be able to keep those big, But whatever. I mean, he's a symbol now. He doesn't have to be that big, but I know it's like, it's probably driving him crazy, honestly, mentally, because it's like your whole being is tied into wearing those sleeveless shirts. And, he couldn't tear the shirt off for obvious reasons. But it's, whatever. It's hard for me with Hogan because those, it's because no matter, it's hard to look past those remarks, even though I know he didn't know he was being filmed, but he also, his apology was so weak and whatever. But yeah, it was just there.
All right, so these World Cup opening matches, Mysterio beat Randy Orton in a fairly short match. Actually, how long was that match?
5 minutes. Mysterio rolled him up. Orton gave an RKO after, threw him to the floor, dropped his chest on the announcer's table. So the story of the match is that Ray won. It was a nothing match. There was one great spot, which was when Ray came off the top ropes in the drop kick. That was the Orton drop kick. That's like, for that split second, it was like, these guys are great. But the rest of the match was nothing. And then the idea is that Ray had to go in hurt against Miz next. So, yeah.
And then Miz against Jeff Hardy. None of these opening matches were all that interesting or important.
It was just a match. It was okay. And Hardy went for a twist of fate, and Miz got out and hit the skull-crushing finale to beat him. Just beat him, That's all.
Similarly, Seth pinned Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, Bobby Lashley ran into the corner, and Lashley went for a spear. Seth Rollins leapfrogged him, and Lashley ran into the corner. Seth Rollins did the curb stomp and pinned him clean, and yeah, that was that.
Did you find yourself in some of these matches going like, "Is that it? I guess that's it."
In every one of them, every one of them. Lashley Rollins was. I would almost. I mean, it's probably. Is that the worst Seth Rollins match probably in the last year or two?
Yeah. I mean, usually on Raw, he's in position to have some pretty good, decent matches at least.
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't good and it was short and it was no, the crowd didn't care. Yeah, it was just not good.
And then the last first round match was Dolph beating Kurt,
which I think was the best match of the first round. It was all right. Kurt really did nothing but German suplexes and the Olympic slam, the ankle lock. Angle ran into the post. In fact, we hadn't seen that before. And Ziggler does the zigzag and beats him. And I was surprised. I mean, just, it's almost like, why did Kurt come back if he's going to be marginalized? I mean, that's the one thing that they do terribly is they don't protect their legends for shit. Because like Kurt was just like, got beat by Dolph Ziggler, whatever.
And then the Bar beat the New Day thanks to some interference by the Big Show, but at least there was something in this match. It seemed it was a better match than most of the first round matches, but not anything I thought that was as good as their SmackDown stuff.
No, it's a weaker match than you would expect, but it wasn't bad. I mean, it was. I think that it was a little below normal standards for them, but it felt a lot below normal standards because the crowd wasn't really, again, you got 25% of the crowd really got it, and the rest really didn't. So it made it tough.
And then the semifinals matches. So we had our surprise here with The Miz beating Rey Mysterio. I mean, it all makes sense, the way that you explained it in the beginning. But when I was watching this, I thought the same thing, which is why did you beat Rey in a nothing match?
Yeah, and Rey beat him on TV, and the way they do their 50-50 booking, Miz would be the guy that beat him in their mind. And it's funny because when Miz won, I mean, didn't we all figure Miz is going to win the whole thing? Because Shane was going to fire and all that.
Right.
Yeah. So, Miz and Rey was good. It was, again, I think it was about as good as you would expect them to do for a regular TV match, but not pay-per-view caliber match at all. It's kind of, Rey selling his ribs from the Orton attack most of the way. And, I didn't think much of Miz in the match, honestly. I thought Rey carried the whole match, but it was good.
And then Seth Rollins loses to Ziggler thanks to and helps some interference with Drew McIntyre, which actually played into the finale, sort of. And Dolph beat Seth Rollins in this match.
Yeah, so that was a surprise. I thought it was the best match on the whole show. And easily, for that matter. So Rollins was on the top rope. McIntyre threw him off. Ziggler hit the super kick. There was a spot early in the match where Rollins and Ziggler Rollins and McIntyre went face to face. And Rollins just goes, hit me, big man. You're just going to get him disqualified. And so he kind of made him back off. And they did a lot of near falls. The fans didn't really understand. They did, that's the spots that like Rey Mysterio and, Malenko and Eddie Guerrero pioneered that not everybody does, but, you do the cradle thing. They did all that. The crowd didn't really get it. Let's see. Rollins monkey flipped Ziggler over the top rope at one point and hit a tope on him. Rollins did a superplex on him. Rollins kicked out the zigzag. So this was what I would say would be a normal Seth Rollins Dolph Ziggler television match.
And then AJ beats Samoa Joe. I thought the match seemed. I didn't expect them to go, to have the same matches that they've been having, but it started to pick up, and then right as it started to pick up, then AJ won.
Yeah, I thought that the early part of the match was the strongest stuff on the whole show. Like, it was like these two guys were it was like you're almost like watching a Japanese match, you know, with these two guys.
And this was when the crowd was not even paying attention.
No, and the crowd didn't care at all. No, this was the one where the crowd didn't care at all. Something was going on in the crowd. Everyone's head was turned. I don't know if there was a fight. I don't know if there was, you know, it's the reaction of a beach ball, but I think that they'd probably murder somebody if they had a beach ball. So I don't know, you know, what the deal was. But they were working a great match, and then it just ended. You know, AJ did a, you know, phenomenal forearm, 1, 2, 3. I mean, I couldn't even believe it because they didn't really build to the finish. They were just working a hard match at a 20-minute style, and then at the 11-minute mark, it was over. But you know, like they were hitting so much harder than everybody else that it was almost it's like it almost like jars you because everyone's working. Like, you know, when you watch WWE, you don't. The only time you ever feel, to me, I mean, a lot of people will watch WWE and they always say like it's soft, right? I never get that feeling when I watch it because I just watch it and it's what it is. But if I watch and that's why I never watch New Japan before WWE unless it's like their pay-per-views on the same day and I have no choice. Because if I watch WWE after New Japan, then in my mind, oh my God, this stuff is so soft and weak.
Yeah.
Because you're used to, your mind is conditioned to this hard style, and then these guys, after everybody else was, you know, I mean, I wasn't thinking soft, weak, but then I'm watching these guys do a hard style, and it's like, wow, these guys are so hard. And then all of a sudden it's like, God, everybody else is so soft. You know, but like they hit each other hard, and that's why these guys get busted open all the time.
Yeah.
Because they're out there, they got whatever it is in their minds that makes them pro wrestlers.
It's also their way to stand out from everybody else.
Yeah, but they also, I don't want to say pride, but I think it's a mental thing that their idea of wrestling is different than these other guys. And you know what it is? Probably because a lot of these guys were brought up in this way, and these guys were brought up going to Japan and working TNA where, you know, I mean, as much as people want to knock TNA, they worked hard. You know what I mean? I remember when Christian went to TNA, and Christian was like one of the best workers in WWE, and he went to TNA, it's like, God, how come he's not that good? And then he went back to WWE and he was great again.
Yep.
And it's because everybody else in TNA was working laps around him because they worked so freaking hard and fast and all this. So these guys, yeah, they did 10 minutes of a TNA match and then it was over. And you know, ultimately, for such a big grudge match and everything like that, I found, you know, having said how great it, you know, the first 10 minutes were, I found it terribly disappointing.
Yeah, yeah. And then we already talked about Lesnar and Strowman. And so the way that they set up Shane to get into the World Cup is that The Miz hurts his leg. The Miz is trying to plead and beg that he's okay. He never gets injured. He said that like a bunch of times. I never get hurt. And
he doesn't.
Well, except for, I think he got the one concussion in that WrestleMania match, right? Was that the only time?
He's got 1 or 2 concussions. He got AJ kicked his teeth out once.
Oof. And so Shane would not let the ring announcer say that the match was forfeited. And I was thinking like, okay, who's in the back who hasn't wrestled yet, who Shane can bring out? And then the second time he stopped the ring announcer from saying anything, I was like,
I thought they were going to bring Ray back.
Well, Ray was one of the ones, and then I was kind of going through the names. And I was like, I don't think they have anybody left. And then once he stopped the guy the second time, I said, he's wrestling, and then he put himself into the match.
Yeah.
And so he actually goes on to win the World Cup in a tank top and jeans with these big old arms flexing all over the place.
That he never had when he was young, and now he's...
What a spectacle that was.
So Shane is 47, 48. 48. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, he only went 2 minutes. Did the coast-to-coast drop kick. I mean, just out of nowhere, he does the coast-to-coast drop kick, and then 1, 2, 3, and it's like, that's it? 2 minutes? You know? Yeah, that's what happened.
And so he gets the cup, and he's just celebrating like crazy, and so you know it was. I didn't know what to make of it, but thinking of what you said, where they're going with it, it makes sense for him to be so over the top with this stuff. And so then the main event was the longest match of the night. Shawn Michaels, Triple H beat Undertaker and Kane. Triple H with the injury gave like maybe the worst pedigree of his career.
Both of
in that
them,
match.
because he had two pedigrees. But the one that, the winning pedigree was, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean,
what are you going to do?
Not that I necessarily felt bad for these guys, but when I was watching it, I thought back to there's a couple moments, or there's a couple things that went through my mind. Baseball, in the 80s and 90s used to have what they would call old timers games, and they would have a lot of the legends.
It felt like old timers games.
A lot of the legends play a very friendly game. They're not really competing. Though in the NBA they did something similarly at the now they have the slam dunk contest, the 3-point contest. Around that time when they first debuted it, they also had old timers.
Didn't they have like legend games in the NBA? Because I know I saw them.
And what happened is all these guys were blown out their knees, so they stopped having the games.
Okay, yeah.
And so in this match, you have Triple H tear a pec, Shawn gets busted, Undertaker looks like he can barely do anything. I just felt that in that instance, I felt bad for them because they had to kind of perform, and they tried, but they were just not willing. They were not able to perform the way that they probably wanted to.
Yeah, age. You know what the sad part of all this is that these. I mean, not Shawn, because he never did this, but Triple H and Undertaker. I remember in the late 90s when Ric Flair's like 48, 49 years old, and they're just ripping on him. I mean, it's like, it's one thing when you're ripping on Hogan and Piper, but they were ripping on Rick. And that Rick worked rings around those two guys. It's like when Rick was 48, he was a lot better than Triple H. I don't want to get into Undertaker, and it's so anyway, the moral of the story here for all you young wrestlers that are listening is that when you see these guys that are 50 go in there and you go, oh my God, they suck because you're 30 and you're great. Don't do it. Because someday you're going to be 50, and unless you're Tenru or Negro Casas or Ricky Steamboat, you're going to have egg on your face when and I'm going to be saying the same thing in 20 years that like, you said that Triple H sucked and now you're, you know what I mean? So Kenny Omega or any of these guys, don't go too hard.
All right, so
But it sucked. That match sucked.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
It wasn't good. We need to kind of speed through some of this stuff before we hit our time limit here. But so I wanted to get to a couple of things you wrote about All In 2.
Oh, my God.
I don't know how we're going to speed through this. But in The Observer, which everyone can go check out on the website, Hangman Page turned down the ROH offer, which I think was pretty much expected.
Completely expect. He already turned down WWE.
So
yeah.
So and Cody's been talking a lot about All In 2, and so my question about All In 2 is, without the relationship to ROH, from a production standpoint and from a talent standpoint, like how do they make that show work unless there's some other agreement?
I don't know. There's so many unanswered questions right now, but yeah, I mean, because one of the things that people forget is how much Ring of Honor helped them to do that first thing. And they learned a lot. Gary Juster taught Cody a lot, but still, taught him how to talk to buildings and taught him how to put together a show. But these guys, I mean, like their first show was such an incredible success. But they're guys that have like literally run one show in their lives pretty much. Well, I mean, I guess the Young Bucks have done some indie show, run some indie shows, and Cody probably helped his dad when he was a teenager, but it was dad who was running the shows. But it's there's a lot that can go wrong and always does. So it's a very but Cody, Cody during it's like there is no definitive anything for All In 2. But he basically said on the cruise that he will do everything as possible, in everything possible to make sure that there is an All In 2.
It seems to me, based off of those statements, that he believes that they're going to do it. Like, or else he wouldn't be that adamant about it.
I believe they all believe that. I believe they all believe there's going to be an All In 2. But it's, there's reasons. And again, you can't figure, because, everyone says they're sticking together, but there's a lot of money being thrown, and some guys may, not take it. But look, WWE just lost Roman Reigns. You know what I mean? And they paid a hell of a lot of money for Brock Lesnar for like 3 matches.
Yeah.
And they're paying Ronda Rousey an incredible amount of money. So and they got a SmackDown show that needs, they're whatever. There's a lot of they want those guys, and I can see why you would. They want that, that feud would be great to have. I mean, and the timing is perfect. I mean, it's amazing in the story in the sense that it's the first time since in 17 years since WCW and ECW went down that you have that feud that can't miss, the promotion versus promotion. Because remember the first Invasion thing did, what was it? God, I'm trying to think what number the number was. 775,000 buys on pay-per-view. I mean, no non-WrestleMania show has ever done that, ever. They botched the angle completely, but the fact is it was so hot that the first one still worked. So they have the opportunity to do, maybe not that big, but something, but the biggest thing they could do since then. It's sitting right there, and the guys to make it work don't want to come. It's like everybody else in wrestling, and I'm sure, and every single one of them, here's the weirdest part, every single one of them when they were kids, what do you think that their goal was? To be there. Mm-hmm. To be there in the biggest angle of the last 15 years, on top, with making, again, when you're 17 years old, you can make $1 million, $2 million a year, maybe, if you're lucky, but $1 million for sure, minimum. And at the age of, how old's Nick Jackson? 28, 29, probably? I should know. And you're going to say no? Could you imagine at 17? I'm going to say no. But that was the power of All In, and also the power of being in control of their own careers. And
so that's the other point that you mentioned. One of the things is that they really enjoy the booking power, and they're writing their own stuff, which they would not get in WWE.
No, they wouldn't. But if there's something, it's one thing to book a show, to run a whole bunch of angles, comedy angles, to build to a show and have it all pay off and you're done and you go like, big smile on your face, and they deserve that big smile on their face with what they pulled off, And I saw it, and they were so, they were so happy. Even though their match was cut short, they were so happy. But like nights like that, that's like, you might get one of those, Though they can't happen every night. Now that's not to say it's a lot more difficult, like booking a promotion than booking one show. It's just different. That's not to say they can't do it. Mm-hmm. I ain't going to bet against anybody doing anything right now. I'm certainly not going to bet against those guys, but it's different.
You also had a quote in the Observer. You didn't mention the person, but you said you asked something about, are there billionaires out there or whatever? And it was kind of a joke, but
it was meant as a joke. I asked somebody it's a joke, and he gave me a very straight answer. I go like, it was someone who it's like, so how many billionaires have been what's the word? How many billionaires are like feeling you out? Because I thought he would say 0, because it's not one of these guys. It's not anyone. It's not a name that any of you guys would expect, but it's one of the first people I would talk to on a situation like this. And he goes, more than you think.
Would have been me too if I won the lotto. Okay, so was there anything else to that story that you thought was relevant to bring up? I mean, I know they're no longer Bullet Club at all. They're now
they got
Elite.
that taken away from them. They're Elite. Well, I guess they're technically they can merchandise themselves as Bullet Club until the end of the year, or are going to merchandise. They're going to still be selling T-shirts as Bullet Club till the end of the year, but they're pretty much moving on to the Elite because New Japan owns Bullet Club, which is a real interesting thing. Again, who knows what's going to happen with New Japan? I get this feeling of New Japan when New Japan, trying to build around like Fale and Tama Tonga and these guys as like top heels with Gedo managing them and Jay White. And it feels to me like when Mid-South started losing its talent, you know what I mean? And like the last 2 years of Mid-South. But I mean, New Japan's still hot as hell, and they're very profitable, and their business is good. It's still good right now. tonight's show sold out weeks in advance with Evil in the main event, of course, with Jericho. But it also was good that, shows that Jericho drew the second time. Granted, it's a smaller building, or third time, I should say. But it's a smaller building, but it's his second time in Osaka, too. So it's not even the first time in there. So that's good. But then, again, who knows if Jericho's going to be back in New Japan after the Tokyo Dome? Who knows about anything? We are in a really, we're saying this until February. And then March, we'll have a lay of the land. But till February and March, I think I'm going to be saying all the time, it's going to be really interesting for the next couple of months.
Okay, so the Power Struggle show, there's a 3-way for the finals of the Super Junior tag. It is Desperado Kanemaru against Shingo Takagi and Bushi, and also against Sho and Yo.
So Sho and Yo yesterday won their match. So it's a 3-way tie, and they're all going in. So yeah. So the show, real quick, it's Volador and Soberano, and Tiger Mask and Liger against Taguchi, Chris Sabin, ACH, and Toa Henare, which will probably be their short, real explosive, good match. Toge Makabe and Tomoaki Honma and Kushida against Tamatonga Tangaloa and Robbie Eagles, which again should be good. Okada and Beretta against Jay White and Fale, which, should be heated because this is like one of the last, big shows for Okada and Jay White to really build the Tokyo Dome. Mm-hmm. And also, and I presume Beretta's doing the job here because I think they're really putting Bullet Club over strong, which they have to do right now. Then we got the 3-way, which we just talked about. We got Omega and Ibushi against Tanahashi and Dave Finlay. I think everyone knows who's losing that fall. But again, Omega and Tanahashi really have to look strong. They have to be strong tonight.
That match should be really good.
Yeah. And then Taichi and Goto replacing Ospreay. Their last match totally blew. It's a horrible match. Then it's Ishii and Suzuki. Their last match was incredible, so this one should be as well. Naito and Sabre, who have had a couple of great matches this year, I expect Naito to win that. And then Jericho and Evil, and I would presume strongly that the show ends with Naito laying out Jericho in some form after he beats Evil. That would be my prediction.
And what time is this show going up?
It's 4 a.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Pacific tonight, our time. So we'll wake up and watch it, I guess, in the morning.
Yeah.
With UFC.
Yep. And UFC from Madison Square Garden. So did you see any of the Jones and Gustafson stuff?
I saw nothing. Did you see any of it?
We talked a little bit about who Jones wants. He mentioned Brock, but I guess he did push Gustafson after.
How did that look?
I didn't really see it. I saw some pictures of it. I didn't see the actual video. But I guess the interest to me is, how if they do anything with the 3 guys tomorrow. Like Cormier is obviously in the main event. We talked about Lesnar, and if Jones is there, like it almost feels like it's almost 2 guys vying for 1 guy in a sense.
They are. If you're Brock, who do you pick?
I think you pick.
I think you probably wait, right?
Well, yeah, you got to wait, but I think you can make the most money from Jones, but you're also going to get beat pretty easily, I think.
I don't think he's beating Cormier if Cormier trains hard.
He's probably not going to beat Cormier. Probably has a little bit better of a chance, though.
He would probably think he has a better chance against Cormier because he's got the reach and... Yeah, I think so. So okay. So then, which one do you go for? The 1 shot or the hope for 2? Because if you beat Cormier, the Jones fight's much bigger.
Yeah.
If you lose to Cormier, the Jones fight you can do it, but it's a lot weaker. You go in there with Jones, you're probably not going to win, and there is no second fight. Mm-hmm. Or if there is, it's not a big deal. Then you go back. Then you go back to WWE, really. So it's an interesting thing. But Cormier's 251. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but this fight should not. I know why it's happening, but this fight shows a failed system. It shows the New York Commission the Nevada Commission both failed, right? And because Derek Lewis should not be allowed to fight this soon after the punishment that he took against Volkov, even though he won the fight. And Cormier shouldn't be allowed to fight with one hand. And Cormier's not in shape. I mean, he's 251 pounds. He's not, he's, it's like he may win, if he loses, obviously he blows the Lesnar fight. And he blows the, I don't say he blows the Jones fight, but kind of does. I mean, I guess he could still do it, but, he blows his all-time great status that he wants because he took a fight when he shouldn't be fighting. Because they offered him a ton of money to save the Garden show, and he's a good soldier, and it's a lot of money, and you can always lose. You can always use millions of dollars, but I've got to believe that he wouldn't fight Miocic like this, and that's why it's Derek Lewis, and just the feeling that he's so far superior to Derek Lewis, which he is. I mean, he is, but that doesn't mean he's going to beat him when he's hurt.
What do you think is the difference in...
But he also could win and look terrible, too, which doesn't help you.
Well, what's the difference, do you think, in buys with this fight and just if they didn't have it? Like, is it that big of a difference, do you think?
Not as much as they're paying. I think that it's like almost a thing. We're in the Garden. I think it's the pressure of the Garden. But, with the main event was... and look, it was going to be Eubanks who didn't even make weight. So can think of that. She missed by 2.2 pounds, championship weight.
Yep.
So imagine if they would have put Shevchenko against her, and then she misses weight in the main event. Even though Shevchenko's probably beaten her for sure. But and Nate's out, so it's okay. So Weidman and Jacare. And what's underneath that? Is it Brunson and David Branch and Jared Cannonier? And is there another big one? That shows you how in depth I am on this, how deep I am on this off the top of my head after watching WWE all week.
Well, I mean the way I guess this is sort of like when WWE does Hell in a Cell and they don't have any angles to build to the cell, and so they just put matches in. It's like they booked this so far in advance to run Madison Square Garden, and they don't have the card for it. If they could have done it a month later, they'd have had the card for it.
Yeah. But anyway, so what you're saying is with Weidman and Jacare, I would say 100,000 buys. This one, I don't know. Do you think 350?
I have no clue on this one.
Because I don't know what Derek Lewis means, because Derek Lewis got over really big, I think, in that I think Derek Lewis got over really big on a show that did, 2.4 million buys. So there was something to be said for that. Did you hear that Derek Lewis is getting a Popeyes endorsement?
I saw that.
Oh, Cormier's been wanting that for his whole life. Cormier's like the biggest Popeyes fan in the whole world. That's the worst part about living in San Jose.
I know.
Compared to living in Louisiana, where he came from, or you know what I mean? Is that like they don't have Popeyes here, do they?
There are a few.
There are a few?
But they're not that many.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I used to see Popeyes in other places more than here.
Yeah, I can think of two.
Okay.
So I guess you and Brian talked about the other matches on yesterday's show. I guess that's it. Though the only other thing I wanted to kind of get to, if we had time, which we do, we have a couple minutes left, which is they're going to show the Jericho Cruise matches
tomorrow night.
Yeah. And for either Fight TV or people with the Honor Club subscriptions?
Yeah.
Okay, so those of you who have the Honor Club subscriptions can watch. That's kind of a cool deal.
Yeah. Everyone, I have heard since everybody got back this week from numerous people who were on that cruise. And, I mean, to say like 10 out of 10 is like across the board, 10 out of 10.
Wow.
It must have been because the wrestlers said that they were the coolest fans. The fans said that they were the coolest wrestlers. Everybody was, in great spirits. The wrestlers worked way harder than I thought they were going to work. I thought, it's a cruise show. You kind of do lots of comedy. You play to the audience. And I heard like Mark and Jay Briscoe just had a killer match, and the Young Bucks had 2 killer matches on the show. and but I heard like up and down that like the matches were way better than anyone expected. And I don't think people went on the cruise to see 4-star matches.
Yeah.
I think they went on the cruise to but they could get all the autographs, all the food. I mean, there were so many people who told me that I needed to go next year. I mean, that this was, you really should have gone.
You and Brian need to do a show.
Look at JR. He did like podcasts with everyone under the sun. Everyone's there. Ricky Steamboat. I mean, it's like, God, there'd be no end. We could just do podcasts. We could do 20 podcasts there with the talent that they had there.
You'd have like a quadruple observer for that weekend.
Yeah, I guess so, with all the stories. Yeah. So maybe I can do some podcasts in January when I'm in Japan. I don't know if that's possible.
I mean, there will be people there that would know how to help you out, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe I could do something with Jim Valley or something, huh? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be interesting.
So how long until WWE steals Jericho's idea for themselves?
God, don't you think next year? This was a real success. I mean, he legitimately sold that thing out. He's going to do another one next year, which would be interesting, because I don't think he could. I think I don't sense him going back to WWE, because if he goes to WWE, could he do the cruise with independent guys? Although he did work some WWE, he worked a couple WWE.
I mean, he announced the thing when he was still sort of with them, I guess.
No, he was completely with them when they announced it, right?
Yeah.
And then he had to make a deal with Ring of Honor to get talent, because he obviously went to WWE first, with the idea, and they didn't want anything to do with it. So
I wonder if some of that was just, the idea of their guys kind of on a boat with lots of alcohol and fans, and maybe
one of the things that I thought going in is we're going to hear some stories because whenever wrestlers get together, and there's alcohol, at these conventions, there's always one guy or two guys, the Buff Bagwell stories or something. I didn't hear one story. I mean, I suppose maybe there was, but I mean,
they didn't book Buff, so.
I mean, I know. I mean, like I know guys drank, but I didn't hear any like really like bad stories or like nobody swearing at fans or anything like that. Like whatever it was.
I mean, I saw some videos where Jericho was pretty toasted, but I mean, maybe he's
he was, but I'm sure I'm sure he wasn't the only one, but but it wasn't like it was in like a bad way, like he was, someone was starting fights, and I didn't hear anything negative like that. So it was evidently it was like a big success.
All right, so we will be back after the UFC show tomorrow.
Long day tomorrow.
Long day. We'll talk about the Power Struggle show as well, and you're not going to have time to watch the Jericho Cruise match.
Not till Sunday. No. It's too much.
All right, so thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.